and breaking news this morning, as we just heard, the rate of inflation in the UK was 6.7% in September.
Who knew?
That's exactly the same as it was in August.
There's only one way to make sense of all of this. Joining us is Danni Hewson, financial analyst from AJ Bell. Danni, welcome back, because you were the only person who's ever made sense of this. Let's just talk about this in basic terms. Explain. Good news, bad news, what does it mean for your average Joe on their way to work, on the way to school this morning? What does it mean?
It means that, unfortunately, the price at the pump has kept inflation higher than we had expected it was going to be. Most economists did think that it would come down just a teeny tiny bit, but unfortunately, we've seen the price of oil really volatile, and clearly the situation in the Middle East does lead to a degree of concern about where the oil price is going to go in the future. There is a touch of good news in here, though, because food prices were the biggest downward pressure on these numbers. So for the first time in a couple of years, we actually saw food inflation fall month on month. And I think if you have been to the supermarket recently, chances are you will have noticed that the supermarket price wars and falling prices are making things much easier. When you go to the checkout, you take a look at your bill and you think, OK, it's not quite as bad as I thought it might be.
And just really quickly, Danni, Chancellor Jeremy Hunt, he made that pledge to bring inflation down to 5%. He's now got only 3 months left. Is it doable? Was it ever doable?
It was doable, but I honestly think now it's a 50-50 chance as to whether or not that pledge will be met, because, you know, we are still 3 times the Bank of England's target. We are still, you know, almost 2% above 5%. And clearly what is now going on in the Middle East is something which potentially has the impact of actually putting inflation up. So I think while there are still things like food inflation, which means that it could be doable, it is going to be a tough ask, I think.
Danni, the other big news today, it's on every newspaper front, triple lock pensions, the rise that pensioners will get in April. Again, in layperson's terms, what does today's news mean? Because we're waking up to stories that say, oh, you're going to get 8.5%. No, you're not. What does it mean for people, the pound in their pocket?
So what it means is that at the moment we have something called the triple lock, which determines how much pension, the state pension, will rise by every April. And that is whether or not it's 2.5% inflation or average pay growth, whichever is higher. So the inflation number which they base it on is the September inflation number, which we have got today, and it is lower than earnings of 8.5%. Now, the question is, which earnings figure does the government go with? Does it go with that 8.5%, which includes those extra bonuses, the bits that the NHS in particular and civil servants got, those one-off payments, or does it go without the bonuses, which would bring it down to 7.8%? The government has changed the dynamics before. It has changed the number that it was going to use. So a couple of years ago, it said, hang on a second, pay is rising too fast. That's not a fair figure. So we're going to go with inflation and give you just over 3% rather than 8%. Last year, of course, 10.1%. The difference potentially could be around 100 quid a year in your pocket. Now, for some people, they'll say, well, that's not a lot. But for people whose only income is the state pension, that is a lot. And for them, even this increase, I think, is going to be difficult for them to deal with over the coming year.
Brilliant. Absolutely. Thanks, you
Danni.
so much, as ever, Danni Hewson.
Marvellous.
Always makes things make sense for us.
You can sort of understand it, because if you're a pensioner watching this, you want to know what's going to happen to the pound in your pocket. And my mother-in-law's watching, and she's very old.
How dare you?
And very short.
Apologies.
And very scary.